happened. And so there's a lot of other issues besides financial. There's a lot of health issues as well at stake. And realistically, we are sort of at war with Mexico because there's a 300-yard section, 300-mile section of the southeastern border of Mexico that they can't control because it's all in mountainous areas, or they say they can't control it. But they also took a territory that's 80 miles inland into the United States. And we have drug cartels going around with equipment that's just as good as any equipment that we have for intel, and they're scanning the whole border, and they're directing the drug trafficking where to go. And there's a lot of good people that are trying to come over here, but there's more bad people than good. And 1 out of every 9 people coming over the border is an Islamic jihadist. That's how they're getting into our country now. And at this particular time, what I'd like to do is to bring on Charlie Bass. And everybody, please give Charlie a round of applause.
Thank you, Richard. It's good to be here. Thank you for your time. 2006, in early November, I was defeated for Congress. I served for 12 years. Prior to that, I've been in the state Senate. Prior to that, I've been in the legislature for 6 years. It was actually a pretty nice time for me after that election. I never thought I'd see my name on the ballot again in New Hampshire. Went back to the things that I've done prior to being in politics, my businesses, working primarily with companies and industries that are interested in making it the alternative energy field. Biomass, liquid fuels, wood pellets down in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. I also help raise money for Republican candidates for the Senate. And life is pretty good. Like everybody in this room, when I read the Obama administration was going to rack up $1.5 trillion or $1.6 trillion deficit in the last fiscal year, that the agency increases on average in fiscal year 2008 were over 45% in 1 year. When I saw the stimulus bill pass $1 trillion, fundamentally different from my philosophy of how to stimulate the economy. The Obama administration that Senator Reid and Speaker Pelosi proposed, pushed essentially the federalization of the healthcare insurance system in America. When I saw that there were candidates preparing to run for Paul Hogan's for the 2nd Congressional District seat, I said to myself that the things that I do in life these days, which are great, are meaningless if there's no America 10 years from now. I co-wrote an op-ed with Fred Tausch, who we all know, which we discussed the fact that America is pretty close to countries of Greece and Spain and Portugal. And that in these economic times, poor economic times, jobs and the economy are everything, but not government spending. If I'd been in the U.S. Congress, I would have been part of a group that would have supported tax relief for earned income for working Americans and for businesses, and to provide the kind of economic climate that will produce real jobs, not jobs that only last for a few months, to do things that may or may not need to be done. But what's most important to me is that America cannot sustain a situation where 43 cents out of every dollar is borrowed, that the entire discretionary budget of this country is borrowed from not just our children and our grandchildren, but from you and from me. This isn't about our children and grandchildren anymore, it's about us. And that's why we're out, you, me, and a lot of other people, with a message to Washington that we've had enough. Now, I've been there for 12 years. I served on the Budget Committee for 8 years, and 4 of those 8 years were surplus budgets. And we would have had 5 if it hadn't been for 9/11. Subsequent to 2002, I don't condone the deficit budgets that the Republican administration ran up. I voted for every single across-the-board budget cut on the appropriation side that came before the Congress. I collaborated with my colleague from Arizona, Jeff Flake, to support all those earmark reduction amendments. But what's most important is, in the 4 years that I've been out of politics, I've had an opportunity to peruse and to think about what could be done to fix the problem. Everybody in this room agrees that spending is out of control, the budgets are bloated, government is becoming centralized in Washington, and it's unacceptable. But the question is, what do you do about it? And I don't want to see 2010 go by, 2011, and elect people who have great speeches but don't have great solutions. Now, I voted for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, and it didn't happen. I voted for term limits. I voted for all of that stuff. We don't have 5 to 7 years to fix this problem, which is what it would take to amend the U.S. Constitution. We have to figure out how to make changes in Congress that balance the Congress's propensity to spend, which has been its habit now for close to 100 years. Now, over the years, there have been various proposals brought before the Congress. And unfortunately, to date, none of them have been particularly successful for various different reasons. The most recent of which, of course, was the Graham-Rudman-Hollings bill. Before that, the Budget Impoundment Control Act back in 1974. I would like to suggest to you, having given it some thought, that we should do the following. From 1941 to 1974, there was a committee in both the Congress and the House, which was commonly known as the Byrd Committee. Not Robert Byrd, but Harry Byrd from Virginia, who retired in 1975. It was a committee that was established during World War II to try to find revenue to pay for the Second World War and not raise taxes. It was called by the rather uninteresting name of the Committee to Identify Unnecessary Federal Expenditures, or some such name. It became known as the Byrd Committee. And that was a committee that had the ability to make recommendations to both bodies for unnecessary spending. And I would submit to you that were it not for this committee, all of the great, huge programs that were developed during the Depression would still be with us today. I believe that what the Congress should do is establish a permanent standing committee on reduction of unnecessary federal expenditures. It should be a balance to the Appropriations Committee and the committees that have jurisdiction over entitlement spending. And that committee should be able to bring directly to the floor of the House, without consideration of the jurisdiction of any of the other standing committees, recommendations for cutting federal spending. If you think about Congress objectively in the Senate, they have committees, all the committees, primary function is to raise and spend money. There isn't really any check on that. But there was in the past. Is this something brand new? No. But it's the only identified process or institution that actually was effective. But I would beef up its powers, and I would say that if a resolution passes the Congress, it has to be in that year's appropriation or reconciliation package as a cut. What this does is two things. First of all, it brings the American people into the debate on cutting spending in Washington like it's never been before. Secondly, this committee would serve as a deterrent to the committees that spend, because they would know that any of this foolish, unnecessary programs that they support would be subject to public scrutiny, which isn't the case today. And I believe, as this committee worked for some 40 years, that it would be more effective than what we have today, because I assure you that the budgetary process today is dysfunctional. The U.S. Congress won't even have a budget this year for the first time since the budget process was created. And we have a golden opportunity now to make a change in Congress as an institution, to make it work, make Congress work, and stop the spending. I want to be elected to Congress, not because I want to be a congressman. I've done that. Believe me, I've done that. I want to go to Washington because I want to make a difference. I want to do my part to try to save America, and I want to get the heck out of there. This is It's an important year for everyone. We need to nominate the candidate in this primary who can win the election in November on the 2nd. And I would respectfully submit that I can do that, and I can make a difference. So I thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll take any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
Spoke a lot about finance. Pretty easy question. I'm not sure what the percentage is right now of our GDP that's spent in the federal budget, but
85%. It's out of control.
that's fine. Whatever the percentage, what do you believe the right percentage is? What's that number?
Well, what I don't know. I would suggest that it would be whatever an historic average would be, which would be a lot less than 85%. I don't know. I'm not an economist. What do you think?
20%?
Well, it has to be something because we have to defend the nation and so forth and so on. But let me give you an example of how hard this problem is. Right now, interest on the national debt alone is about $400 billion. By the way, the whole budget of the United States when Ronald Reagan took office was about $400 billion, maybe $450 billion. And the average interest rate on U.S. Treasury instruments now is about 2%, 1.8% average. In 2000, the average interest rate on Treasury instruments was about 5%. That's 10 years ago. And you can tell it's pretty elemental math. If it goes back to 5%, which is quite possible, interest on the national debt alone would be $1 trillion. We can't sustain that.